Well, hello everybody. This is Chris Dew with eOne, and I want to welcome you to our session today on accessing historical Dynamics GP data right inside of the NetSuite interface. Just to start out very quickly, we have just a quick little agenda review. We're gonna start with just discussing a couple of terms that we see that people oftentimes maybe aren't quite aware of, or they're newer to them. So we'll start with that. We'll get into really eOne's overall migration strategy, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time today talking about how we can view historical data that comes from Dynamics GP right inside of the NetSuite interface. All right, so I mentioned a couple terms. First one we're going to start with is Azure Data Lake. And Azure Data Lake is an interesting term. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically just a storage account. What does that mean? Well, it's a place for us to store all kinds of files. So we might store, well, CSVs is what we're going to talk a lot about today, but we could also store things like XML and JSON, or we could store image files, right? Like it could be JPEGs or something like that. We could store PDFs. It's really an unstructured way of storing it, as opposed to like a database, which we probably have used in the past especially with Dynamics GP. This is a way for us to store that. Now, here's one of the key things, right? It exists inside of your Azure account. So that's what we use. We never store data on our customers. The other part to it is it's a really cost-effective storage mechanism. If you have under a terabyte of data, I mean, you're going to be spending way less than, well, for most people, I would say less than $20 a month. Again, probably the average things that I've seen people coming from historical GP is probably less than 100 gigabytes of data that's being put up there. So even at that, you're way under $20 a month. Okay. Another thing is that one piece of information about Azure Data Lake is it's one of those things that I think does scare a lot of people, that they think it becomes a development tool. And what you're going to see today is that Popdock really takes that aspect of it out and really gives mere mortals a chance to be able to interact with it and again report off of it, which is, I think, a key part here. Okay. So the second thing we're going to talk about and spend a lot of time today is on the Popdock Data Lake upload tool. This is a tool that is part of the Popdock solution and is going to allow us to, in an on-prem scenario, connect to our Dynamics GP data, and more importantly, not just connect to it, but allow us to push it through Popdock up into a data lake and allow us to access it. So that's kind of the key part to this today. So we'll spend a lot more time on that today, but those are two terms that you're probably going to hear a couple more times in this few minutes that we have together today. Okay, I talked about what is eOne's overall migration strategy to help our GP customers as they are looking at either looking or have maybe already even gone to other systems. And so we have a couple of different things on this slide. One is, again, for the vast majority of you, you probably have an on-premise solution today, so you already have a SQL server or a server on your network, and that server is something that many people are looking at retiring, I think, at some point in the future, is being able to not needing to run that, anymore or maintain it. So it's certainly one scenario that we're talking about. Still, others of you have maybe gone with a solution where you put it into Azure, or maybe it's on a virtual machine there, or again, in some other cases, you may have even moved the entire database to an Azure SQL. Those are certainly options. And I even have one in here where we have a few like partners that have hosted some GP, and even, like, I'll give one example, Power GP Online. They kind of have some extra special sauce there. So whatever it is, we have a way of connecting to that information and allowing you to access it, and again, more importantly, archive it so that you can turn off those services and quit maintaining it. One thing I do want to point out here, though, is that I also have in this graphic in the middle, I do have Smart Connect. So when you talk about a full migration strategy, we're focusing mainly on accessing the historical data that most people do not want to bring into the new system. It's either really hard, expensive, or again, there's some complexities in there with third-party products or whatever it may be. But Smart Connect can certainly be a part of the solution if you're moving records in there again, and maybe it's not all the history, but you may want to move some of the master records or those kinds of things. So I wanted to make sure that that's part of it because it is, for some people, they need to do some transformation before they put it up there. Now, the last part here is that, again, we're focusing on Popdock today and historical data access. So that's where the rest of the conversation is gonna focus on. Okay, so let's get into it. The biggest thing we're here today is like, how do I see all of that history? If I've moved to NetSuite, how am I able to view that information without my new users needing to leave the NetSuite interface? So the solution that you're going to see, we're going to talk about a couple of things that are possible. We can see, we can make basically lists available inside of there where we see just the history that came from Dynamics GP, and now that's been archived into a data lake. We can also do something kind of unique where we can combine that history with the new information coming from NetSuite. And so now I can have one list that has both of those things all together. And again, I don't have to go looking around a bunch of different places. I have one basically smart list, if you will, that allows us to see all of that information in one place. We can also do some really cool things where we can embed it inside of NetSuite, and we can filter it down by customer or vendor or account, whatever makes sense with the type of data we're putting in there. But this is really valuable because now right on that page that you're going to inside of NetSuite, you can have just the specific information that you need to see in this scenario. So let's go look and see what we have here. Okay, we're going to start inside of NetSuite for this one. And so what I want to show you, I'm going to show you a couple examples of this. If I'm on the NetSuite homepage dashboard, you can see we have Popdock embedded right at the top here. So when I click on this, what it's going to do is it's going to basically, again, here's those smart lists that you have wanted from Dynamics GP. Now this first smart list that's coming up, this is actually kind of unique because this is actually going to pull, well, hopefully, there we go. It's pulling live customer data from NetSuite and just showing you here, right? This is basically the smart lists that you were using in GP, but now you can do it across NetSuite data. But I'm not going to focus on just the NetSuite data today right now. I'm going to focus on this migration scenario, right? This is the GP data that was moved and archived, and I have now made it available right inside of this interface. I've also done something interesting. You can see I have a number of lists that are inside of here, right? Some sales and purchasing lists that I've chosen to put up there. But I'm going to click on this one because I want to show you some specifics on this particular record here. So I'm actually just going to use this favorite that I have for Aaron Fitz in this example. And what I wanted to show you is that this is one of those unique lists, right? This is pulling a combination of history. So most of this record's for our buddy Aaron Fitz that's made the trek into the new system. Most of it's GP, right? This is data that was archived from our GP system and is now able to be seen right here. But you'll see these top two records are not. These ones are coming from the live NetSuite system. So you can see I have this really unique report that is pulling all of this information together and in one place, allowing me to see exactly what I need for that particular customer. Okay, now I want to take it a little different level here. I'm actually going to pull up a customer. In this case, I have Aaron inside of here. And what I wanted to show you is that we can embed right inside of their dashboard or even their card. So, here's another example in this case of seeing just Aaron Fitz's invoices here. But I could also, if I were to switch this to, instead of the dashboard view, back to the form view, you can see I can have all kinds of other information embedded inside of here. And so in this case, let's just mix it up a little bit. I'm gonna click on the Zendesk tickets. Now I have a live look instead of their historical GP access. I have a live look into their help desk system to see what outstanding tickets they may have. So I just wanted to show you that we can do some really cool things where we can filter it down and present just their historical data access or Zendesk, or it could be coming from Shopify. It doesn't matter what it is, Popdock's going to enable you to be able to do that. Okay, so there's a quick little demo of that. Let's get into the part where it's really interesting. How do we actually get that GP data that we're talking about? How do we get that from my on-premise system to the cloud, right, to the Azure Data Lake? And so that's what we're going to focus on now. The tool we're going to show allows us to connect to all your smart lists and favorites and move those to the Azure Data Lake. Couple of key points here, right? It does not require you to open up your SQL Server to the world, right? You don't have to open up that port to the world, or you don't even have to punch, holes in the firewall. That's one of the biggest concerns for people in this is, making their on-premise systems available to the internet. It's always a security concern. And we've had a great gateway in the past that, helps mitigate that, but this is even a better solution because we do not have to do that anymore, right? It allows you to run it right from your network and push it out as opposed to a pull that we've been using. Okay, another key point here, right, is it allows us to do all of the GP smart lists, right? So all of those smart lists that you're used to using right inside of GP, you can use those. You can also use the ones that were built with Smart List Builder, or even Microsoft's version of the baby version of Smart List Builder called Designer. We can use that as well. So any of those lists, we'll bring those in. Those will come in with the human readable names, all that fun stuff. Now, we also have another option. The last bullet point here says all SQL tables. Let me say this a slightly different way. This is your insurance policy. This allows you to basically archive the entire database. So not just GP data, not just the stuff that came from Microsoft. This allows us to do all the third-party products that are out there. Even if you had custom tables that you made, we can move that information and archive it to the data lake for you and allow you to access it right in the cloud. So those are a couple of key points I wanted to make there. Okay, the second part, right after we get connected to the data, how do we actually go about moving it? So some of these are a little bit similar, but a key point here is that this does run in your environment, right? This is not something that we can run remotely or from the cloud. This is now a tool that you run on your premise and hook into your systems. And you don't need to set up another server, right? Again, I mentioned a gateway in the past. That is no longer a necessity. You can hook right into your system and it can be run from a workstation if you want. We will be able to move this data as fast as we can, well, I'll say two ways. As fast as we can get it out or extract it from GP. And so that's gonna matter like how much data you have. Right, if you have a terabyte, it's going to take a little longer to get that out, right? It just takes that much time to run the SQL statements and to dump it into CSV files. The other part is after it's brought out, we're uploading it, and so depending on your internet connection, right? If you have a good upload speed to the cloud, this could happen relatively quickly, or again, it could be slower if you don't have a very good connection to the internet. The last part is that what you'll see in this tool that I'm going to show you next is that we can have the capability of fixing any errors that may occur in a list. So to me, that's really, really important. Is that again, let's just give you an example. Let's say that your IT team chose to do a backup in the middle of the night while it was running through this process, and again, you lost connection to SQL Server, and half of the tables, weren't able to be read. It basically will allow us to pick up right where we left off. So you can show up in the morning and go, oh man, all of these, these 1,000 tables didn't make it inside of there. Let's go ahead and we're going to resubmit those. So that's what I think is a really important piece to this, is that we can allow you from this one tool to interact with it and again fix any problems that may occur. Okay, let's get into a demo of this. So what I'm going to show you next, this is the Popdock Data Lake upload tool. This is really the heart and soul of what we're talking about today. Maybe a key part to this is part of Popdock, right? This is not a separate thing. This is just a little tool that can be installed on your network and then allow us to extract that information out. So what does it look like? You'll see when you log in, it'll ask, do you want to do smart lists or tables? I'm going to do the example today of, we're going to start with smart lists, and if we have enough time, we'll see if we can do the table part. But you're going to log into your Popdock account. So that, again, it is totally tied to your Popdock account where you have some of that setup information. So it is now logging into Popdock. And I'm kind of a slow, I have a very slow network where I'm at. I'm at the airport right now. Okay. I also am hooking into my data lake account, right? We are archiving this information to your data lake. So you'll see that this is where I've specified mine, and now I'm connecting to that connector. Finally, this is the most important part, right? Is that we're on premise and we need to hook into our GP server so that we can really access that data. So we have all the versions in here. You can pick them right from the drop down, and it knows, if there's any interesting exceptions. So let me hit connect on this one. And there we go. Now you can see all the companies that you have. Well, it's pretty simple for me. I have 3 companies, but we've talked to people that have had 70 companies, some that have well over 100 companies, and a lot of people don't want to move every one. There are a few companies that maybe were test companies or maybe are no longer in use, right? Maybe they were consolidated or something like that. And so even an example of the people that had 70 companies, there was 20 different companies that they had no need to archive. And so in that case, you just unmark the ones that you don't want. I'm going to do it in my example. I'm going to unmark the Threes company because I actually don't really have any data in there. Now, what you'll see here is all the lists. These are your smart lists, right? So all the standard smart lists, but then you can see, right, this first one, that's obviously not a standard smart list. That's one that was created with Smart List Builder. Or if we go down here, it'll become pretty obvious, right? We have some EQA smart lists. These are ones that were, created inside of here to for some testing purposes, and these were all built with Smart List Builder. And there's even one in here that was using Smart List Designer. So I wanted to let you know that. In the interest of time, I'm actually going to just select a small portion of these here. Okay, that's probably enough. So just to show you, you don't have to run them all, right? If you're only going to access some payables information and some receivables or whatever, you have that capability. Now, there's a couple of interesting pieces of information in here. What you'll see is it's running 22 transactions. Now, why is it doing that? I didn't select that many lists. Well, it's doing it for the both companies that I did, right? I did it for the Fabricam company and the 4-Iron Foundry company. So it is going through each and every one of them, and it is it's doing that list, one time for each one. Okay, I know there's about 300,000 records in this one, and I can obviously see that I have a little bit slower connection today. So while this is running, let me just step away for a second and kind of show you what it's actually doing behind the scenes. If I go log into my Popdock account now, and if I go into connectors, what it is doing is it's populating this data lake, right? I called it ADL-GP. And so if I open up this data lake, what I'll be able to see is here are the lists that are showing up inside of here. And so again, I did run this before, so I have some of these lists have already been put up here. But what I'm running now is it's basically redoing it, which is kind of a key point, right? Is if you have a let's call it UAT that needs to happen, and they need to see some of this history data inside of NetSuite before you're fully adopting NetSuite, you can do that. You can run this migration process multiple times. It's not really an issue. And again, even though these lists are now essentially CSV files that are sitting inside of an Azure Data Lake, we can do all kinds of things we want with them. So let me pull up this customer list, for example, and here's all the fields. The nice part, right, because it was GP data and we know all of our information about it, we are able to see which fields are numbers or which fields are strings or even, here you go, you can see we have a drop-down list, right? We know that from GP. And so just giving you, if we look at this, instead of giving you 0 and 1, which really isn't that useful to the end user, we actually have that display name. So you don't lose that just by getting rid of GP. We're pulling over that really important information that you can do inside of there. Okay, I want to show a couple more things inside of here, because while we have these standard lists, I did mention a special kind of list, and that was a custom list called a merge list. And so what this means is with a merge is I can pull in data, even though it's coming from very different systems, I can pull it into one place. And so I can pull this historical GP data that we're just moving to the data lake, and I can actually match it with the current information inside of my NetSuite using the NetSuite connector. And now I have one list that has data from both places, and I can view that as needed right inside of the system. So let's go check in on where we're at. Okay, yep, I told you it's about 300,000 rows. We got a few more moments, so let me I'll just keep telling you about a few more things that you can do. So besides these custom lists, and you can kind of think of this as a virtual SQL, if you will, even though neither of these systems is SQL anymore. Again, it was maybe on the GP side of things, but NetSuite is all web services. And if we talk about the data lake, it's now a CSV file. And so this gives us the capability of I can join lists together from very different systems. I could even join in like a CRM system, right? It could be Salesforce or Microsoft's customer engagement, CE, or some other type of system. This allows us that flexibility to do things like that. Additionally, on a list here is that I can actually have a detail associated with this. So what does that mean? I could have a customer list, and I could actually have a drill down from customers to all of the sales transaction from that customer, or all the receivables transactions, or their addresses. Whatever it may be, Popdock allows me to do that, and again, embed that right inside of NetSuite without with very minimal scripting. I'll put it that way, because there's a teeny bit of JavaScript that needs to be tweaked to make sure we're passing in the right vendor ID or customer ID or whatever it may be. But just to show you, like if we wanted to look at this Azure Data Lake tab inside of here. Now again, this is not hitting the SQL Server at all. I still have access to my companies, And again, I mentioned customers, so why don't I just pull that one real quick? If I did customers, and now again, there's no connection to the SQL Server anymore. It's just pulling this CSV file that's sitting in the data lake. And I hope it's not actually running that one right now. Okay, it's still in account transactions. Okay, now it's actually finally going through the upload, right? So it's extracted all these rows and then it's going through the upload. The good part is once we're through with this one big list, the rest of them are going to be really, really fast. Okay. There we go. So here is all of our customers that were formerly inside of GP. They're now available for us to report on. Again, we can get any new columns in there. We can have as many filters as we want to filter this down by state or date they were created, or maybe a certain outstanding account amount, whatever it may be. We have the capability of adding as many filters as we want. We can even do across GP companies. So if I wanted to see all the customers that were there, it's now going to pull from essentially two files. So it's pulling from the one from Fabricam and also joining in the one from Forerunner Foundry. So there we go. Okay. Really, the last piece that I want to bring home again. I maybe shouldn't have. I shouldn't have done the really big one here. So maybe just to reemphasize I did mention the performance, right, on your upload speed. So apparently this network that I'm on at the airport does not have a very fast upload speed, or well, it didn't seem to be super fast in the download either as we were extracting stuff out of the database. So everything's running just a little slow from where I'm at today, but it's not a bad demonstration to show you that even on slower systems, it's going to perform pretty well. So again, if you have maybe just a comment on that, if you are moving, let's just say less than 10 gigabytes of data, it's probably going to be done in a couple hours. If you're talking more, in the hundreds of gigabytes of data, you could probably get into the days possibility, but for most people, it's going to complete in just a matter of hours on this upload. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing because we got another minute or two. It looks like I want to show you the part that how easy it is to get this ready to embed inside of NetSuite. And so we call these widgets. And so what I'll do here is I'm just going to call it NetSuite Invoices widget. We're just going to have a particular list. I could actually do a bunch of different lists if I wanted. I showed you that example in NetSuite as we started today, but I'm just going to choose a single list. It allows me to pick my connector. So I'll pick this Data Lake connector. I'll pick the Fabricam company. And then if I wanted to bring in like sales line items, for example, is a really common one. I can do that. And if I've created favorites on this, right? If I want to have a favorite saying, I only actually want everything for the last year, or maybe the last 3 years or last 7 years, you can basically kind of narrow down that data so it's a smaller data set. I'll do everything because there's not a huge amount of records in here. You have some control over which fields. So if you want, you can override the default fields. And we can pass, I mentioned talking about parameters, right? We can read right off of the NetSuite environment, and we could pass in the customer or vendor so we can filter it out. And then you have a bunch of options too, right? I didn't show this earlier, but we can choose what we want. So if we want to allow it to be exported to Excel, if we want to do the filtering, like I showed you, if we want to show those related type records, I can do that information, or even the totaling and subtotaling, all those kinds of things. I have control over what I want to see. And then if I hit the preview button, what's really nice about this is it's going to give me a quick glance of this data right here And there we go. I'm able to see that. I can even put the theme, right? If we're going to put this inside NetSuite and I want it to look like NetSuite, I can do this. And so now it doesn't feel native, or sorry, I should say it feels native. It doesn't feel foreign inside of NetSuite. It feels just like all the other lists as we put this, even though this was formerly GP data. We don't care. We're making it look and feel like the NetSuite application that we put it inside of. Okay, there we go. All right, we got enough in here for me to show you. This is kind of the key I wanted to show you, is most of these records did succeed on the FabricCam side of things. A few of them didn't have any records, so you'll see that they have been skipped. And then we saw that we actually have a failure on this particular record here. And so if we hover over this, we can actually see that in this case, it looks like there's a problem with my calculation. And so if I went back into, this is actually a smart list builder one, and I have a calculated field on there. If I chose to go fix my calculated field and then basically just do this, saying I want to rerun this again, it's only going to rerun that one list now. And again, we didn't fix anything, so we have the same problem that we had before. But just to show you that you have some control over what you want to do. The last thing I'll show is if we run this again, but instead of choosing smart list, if we choose tables, it'll have us log in. I'll put in my data lake here. Pick my GP version. And then here's the difference. You don't get to choose anything anymore. It just basically says which databases do you want to archive. And so if there's 1,000 tables in there, if there's 2,500 tables like the FabricCam company, it will archive every database that you want. And again, it pulls all the tables. It doesn't matter if they're just Microsoft. And so this will run. And again, this is one of those that could run for a few hours if you have a lot of data. So I just wanted to show you that that's part of it, is we give you really the list that you're going to use, and we also give you that insurance policy to basically make anything available for you at a later time, and make sure you have everything backed up. So let's jump real quickly back into our PowerPoint here. Just a quick recap, right? This allows us to securely connect to your Dynamics GP data on-premise. There's no holes that we have to poke in the firewall, so it's a secure way of doing it, and it's the fastest way to do it. The second point, this is a quick and easy way to move it to the data lake. We've really, even though it's a developer type task behind the scenes, we've made it easier for the consultants and end users to be able to do this. So even not even just moving the data, but being able to report off of it, I think is probably one of the biggest values that you'll see from this. And then again, as I get, basically the value is you have access right inside of NetSuite to see whatever this historical GP data is and other data, but it is simple to access, filter, report off of it without leaving NetSuite if that's where you're going to live going forward. Okay, questions. Let's see if there's any questions in there. Okay, looks like there's a couple. One that I didn't spend a lot of time on today. It looks like if someone is asking, does this work for GP10? Yeah, it does. We have all those versions in there, and I didn't scroll down in the list, but GP10 is one of them. We've actually gone as far back as GP9 for one customer. So just so you know that everything in between, how we're able to do that all the way up to 18.5, which is the newest version for GP. And again, if you find an older version than that, talk to us. Maybe we can, find if there's any nuances between that version. Okay. One more question here. So you don't have to poke a hole in the firewall. Right, okay. It looks like they were kind of referencing our older way of doing it. We had a gateway that you would install before, and you had to access the gate, basically your GP data through that gateway. So this is a new way of doing it that, again, it's a more of a push. So we're pushing the data to the cloud as opposed to pulling it from the cloud. And that, again, allows us to get rid of that requirement. Okay, another question here. Does the number of users inside of NetSuite need to match the Popdock users? It really doesn't, because it's embedded inside of that system. So it's really a pretty easy way of doing that. Okay, I think that's all the questions. So let me wrap this up today. I want to thank everyone for showing up. I hope that you got something out of this, learned a little bit, and dig in and use this tool. And again, hopefully makes your life just a lot easier. If you do have any additional questions, I've put the sales at eonesolutions.com email inside of here. So encourage you to ask any of those questions there. And I just want to thank everybody for their time today, and good luck on your migration project. Thanks, everyone.